See, I'm not one of these people who's worried about everything. You got people like this around you. Country's full of them now.
The George Carlin story you never heard. But first you need to hear this. In 1968, America stood at a crossroads, a nation erupting with change and defiance. The streets buzzed with protests, the air filled with demands for equality, peace, and a challenge to the old order. On television, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour became a cultural lightning rod, boldly addressing topics others wouldn't touch. It was sharp, subversive, and unapologetically rebellious, offering a voice to a generation questioning everything. Amid this cultural upheaval stood a young comedian named George Carlin. He was polished and professional, a sharp-dressed entertainer with neatly combed hair and a knack for making audiences laugh. But this version of Carlin was far from the fearless provocateur he would become. In those early days, he played it safe, entertaining within the boundaries society expected. What came next was a remarkable transformation. George Carlin would shed his clean-cut image, dive headfirst into the counterculture, and redefine the very essence of comedy. His journey was one of rebellion, reinvention, and unflinching honesty, a legacy that would forever change how we see comedy and the world around us. This is the story of George Carlin's metamorphosis into a legend. George Carlin's story begins on May 12, 1937, in the vibrant neighborhood of Morningside Heights, New York City. Born into a modest Irish-American family, his early years were anything but smooth. His father, an advertising executive with a gift for oration, was also a violent alcoholic whose temper often spiraled out of control. By the time George was just 2 months old, his mother, Mary, had made the courageous decision to leave her volatile marriage, taking George and his older brother, Patrick, to start anew. Life in a cramped Manhattan apartment was far from easy, but Mary was determined to give her boys the best chance possible, even if it meant working tirelessly to keep the family afloat. For young George, the hardships of his childhood would become the foundation for his sharp, observational humor. He found comfort and joy in laughter, absorbing every ounce of comedic inspiration he could. Radio shows featuring Bob Hope, Jack Benny, and Milton Berle became a lifeline, introducing him to the power of wit and timing. The irreverence of Mad Magazine would also shape his early sense of humor, feeding his love for satire and the absurd. Even as a child, George seemed to have an innate ability to entertain. He mimicked voices, created characters, and performed impromptu skits for anyone who would listen, turning mundane moments into opportunities for humor. His mother encouraged this creative streak, fostering the beginnings of what would one day become a groundbreaking comedic career. As Carlin grew older, his rebellious streak began to emerge. School, with its rigid rules and structure, was a constant source of frustration for him. He clashed with teachers, resisted authority, and often found himself in trouble for his sharp tongue and mischievous antics. It wasn't that he lacked intelligence. George was bright and quick-witted, but traditional education simply didn't suit him. By the age of 16, Carlin decided he'd had enough. He dropped out of high school, choosing to forge his own path rather than conform to expectations he couldn't respect. This decision to leave school wasn't made lightly, but it reflected the deep sense of independence that would define George throughout his life. He wasn't interested in following the prescribed path. He wanted to create his own. After dropping out, he took on odd jobs, all while dreaming of a future that felt out of reach in the confines of his neighborhood. But George was nothing if not resourceful, and at 17, he made a bold move. He enlisted in the United States Air Force, not out of patriotic fervor, but as a way to escape his circumstances and seek new opportunities. The military, with its strict discipline and hierarchy, might have seemed like an odd choice for someone so averse to authority. Predictably, Carlin's rebellious nature often landed him in hot water. He was written up for insubordination on multiple occasions, and his sarcastic remarks didn't endear him to superiors. Still, the Air Force wasn't a total misfit for Carlin. While stationed at Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, he discovered an unexpected passion: radio. Carlin's first brush with broadcasting came at a small station in Shreveport called KJOE. He started by reading promos and occasionally filling in as a DJ, but the moment he sat behind the microphone, something clicked. Radio offered him a platform to perform and connect with an audience, even if it was a small one. It wasn't stand-up comedy, but it was a step toward something bigger. His quick wit and natural charisma made him a favorite among listeners, and he began to see entertainment as more than just a hobby. It was a career he could pursue. However, Carlin's time in the Air Force wasn't destined to last. His rebellious spirit and disdain for rigid structures continued to clash with military expectations. Over his service years, he accumulated a string of disciplinary actions, and though he wasn't dishonorably discharged, his departure from the military was far from ceremonious. In 1957, Carlin left the Air Force with a general discharge, free to chart his own course. Though his military chapter ended on a less than glorious note, it had been a formative period for Carlin. He left with a clearer sense of who he was and what he wanted to do. The Air Force had introduced him to the thrill of performing, and he was determined to build on that foundation. Returning to civilian life, he carried with him the lessons of resilience and resourcefulness, ready to tackle the challenges ahead. George Carlin's early years were marked by struggle and defiance, but they also laid the groundwork for the unique voice he would become. A voice that would one day challenge authority, inspire generations, and redefine the art of comedy. After leaving the Air Force in 1957, George Carlin returned to civilian life with one clear goal: to pursue a career in entertainment. Having discovered his love for radio during his time in Louisiana, Carlin decided to continue working behind the microphone. His natural wit and charisma made him a perfect fit for broadcasting, and he quickly found himself landing gigs at small radio stations in Louisiana and Texas. It wasn't glamorous work, but for Carlin, it was a chance to hone his voice and connect with audiences in a new way. Carlin's time in radio was as much about learning as it was about performing. He experimented with his comedic timing, developed his speaking style, and even started dabbling in humor during his shifts. However, his penchant for pushing boundaries occasionally got him into trouble. At one point, he was fired from a station in Boston for taking the company's news van on an unauthorized trip to New York City. A move that, while reckless, showcased Carlin's fearless streak and his ability to improvise under pressure. His journey eventually took him to Fort Worth, Texas, where fate introduced him to Jack Burns, a fellow radio personality with a shared love for comedy. Burns was quick-witted, ambitious, and just as determined as Carlin to make it in the entertainment world. The two clicked instantly, bonding over their mutual passion for humor and their desire to break into stand-up. Together, they decided to form a comedy duo, blending their talents into a unique partnership that would set the stage for Carlin's future. Calling themselves Burns and Carlin, the pair quickly began working on routines, crafting sketches that played off their contrasting personalities. Burns had a sharper, more structured style, while Carlin's humor was loose and observational. Their chemistry was undeniable, and it didn't take long for them to start making waves. By 1960, they had moved to Hollywood, the heart of the entertainment industry, to chase their dreams. Hollywood wasn't an easy landscape to navigate, but Burns and Carlin were determined. They found work as morning DJs at K-Day, a Los Angeles radio station, where their comedic banter became a hit with listeners. This job not only paid the bills, but also allowed them to refine their comedic skills. However, their aspirations stretched far beyond radio. Burns and Carlin wanted to perform on stage, and they soon began booking gigs at nightclubs where they could test their material in front of live audiences. Their big break came in the form of an album recorded at the iconic Playboy Club. titled Burns and Carlin at the Playboy Club Tonight. The album showcased their sharp humor and knack for engaging crowds. The routines ranged from clever wordplay to playful jabs at societal norms, a preview of the direction Carlin's humor would eventually take. While the album didn't turn them into household names, it helped establish their credibility in the comedy world and opened doors for future opportunities. Despite their success, the partnership between Burns and Carlin was destined to be short-lived. After 2 years of working together, the duo decided to part ways amicably. Both recognized that their comedic styles, while complementary, were evolving in different directions. Burns went on to work with other comedic talents, while Carlin set his sights on solo stardom. The split wasn't contentious. In fact, the two remained close friends and continued to support each other's careers. For Carlin, this transition marked a turning point. While he valued the experience and lessons learned from his partnership with Burns, he was eager to carve out his own identity as a performer. The comedy duo had given him a solid foundation, but now it was time to find his voice as a solo act. Armed with the confidence and experience gained during his years in radio and the partnership, Carlin stepped into the next chapter of his career, ready to take on the challenges ahead. The Burns and Carlin years were a critical stepping stone in George Carlin's journey, providing him with the tools, exposure, and confidence to navigate the entertainment industry. It was during this time that he began to understand the power of comedy, not just as a way to make people laugh, but as a tool to connect, provoke thought, and challenge the world around him. The stage was set for George Carlin to evolve into the trailblazing comedian he was destined to become. By the early 1960s, George Carlin had successfully transitioned into a rising star in the entertainment world. Shedding his roots in radio and sketch comedy, he reinvented himself as a clean-cut, polished comedian, perfectly suited for the mainstream audience of the time. With a crisp suit, neatly combed hair, and carefully crafted routines, Carlin became a regular face on television. He charmed audiences with his sharp impressions and relatable humor, earning spots on The Tonight Show, The Merv Griffin Show, and other major platforms. Each appearance brought him closer to becoming a household name. In 1967, Carlin released his first solo comedy album, Takeoffs and Put-Ons, a collection of routines that highlighted his talent for observation and impersonation. The album showcased his knack for turning everyday scenarios into clever, family-friendly comedy. It was well received, cementing his place in the world of entertainment. Audiences loved his approachable humor, and producers saw him as a safe, marketable performer. Carlin's career was on an upward trajectory, but something was missing. Behind the scenes, Carlin was growing increasingly dissatisfied with the image he had built. The neatly packaged persona that had brought him success felt stifling, disconnected from the person he truly was. The counterculture movement was gaining momentum in the late 1960s, challenging authority, embracing rebellion, and redefining societal norms. Carlin found himself drawn to these ideals, but his onstage persona didn't reflect the shifting landscape or his own evolving views. The breaking point came in 1969 during a performance at the Frontier Hotel in Las Vegas. Carlin, whose act was tailored to suit the conservative crowds of the Vegas Strip, decided to stray from his usual material. When he used the word ass during his routine, the audience reaction was swift and disapproving. Management at the Frontier didn't hesitate. They fired him on the spot. While the incident may have been a setback in the moment, it became a pivotal turning point in Carlin's career. It forced him to confront the growing divide between the entertainer he was and the person he wanted to be. That moment in Las Vegas marked the start of a transformation. Carlin began to strip away the polished veneer that had defined his early career, embracing a more authentic and edgy style that aligned with his personal beliefs. He let go of the suits, cut ties with the expectations of mainstream success, and started growing his hair long, a physical representation of his shift toward the counterculture. It wasn't just a change in appearance, It was the beginning of George Carlin becoming George Carlin. This period of disillusionment, while challenging, was necessary for Carlin to find his voice. He was no longer content with safe, sanitized comedy. He wanted to push boundaries, challenge authority, and speak honestly about the world around him. The man who had once conformed to the expectations of network television was now on a path to becoming one of the most provocative and groundbreaking comedians of his time. By the early 1970s, George Carlin was no longer content with fitting into the mold of a traditional comedian. The clean-cut suits and safe material were replaced by a look and attitude that better reflected his true self. With long hair, a beard, jeans, and t-shirts, Carlin shed the polished entertainer image and fully embraced the counterculture movement sweeping the nation. This transformation wasn't just physical. It marked a complete overhaul of his comedic style and his approach to the world of entertainment. In 1972, Carlin released FM and AM, an album that captured his transition. The AM side represented his earlier conventional material, while the FM side introduced a bolder, edgier Carlin. The album resonated with audiences, earning him a Grammy Award and signaling his arrival as a voice of the counterculture. Later that same year, he released Class Clown, which included the groundbreaking routine, 7 Words You Can Never Say on Television. This piece became one of the most iconic moments in comedy history, using sharp humor to dissect society's arbitrary censorship of language. The 7 Words routine wasn't just comedy. It was a social commentary on freedom of expression, challenging the hypocrisy of what society deemed acceptable. While audiences embraced Carlin's bold new voice, not everyone was ready for this version of him. At Summerfest in Milwaukee that same year, Carlin was arrested for public obscenity after performing the routine on stage. The incident made headlines and solidified Carlin's reputation as a comedian unafraid to test the boundaries of authority and taste. The controversy surrounding Carlin didn't end there. In 1973, his Filthy Words routine, a variation of the 7 Words, was broadcast by New York radio station WBAI. A listener filed a complaint with the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, leading to a legal battle that would last for years. The case, FCC versus Pacifica Foundation, eventually reached the Supreme Court in 1978. The court ruled in favor of the FCC, granting the agency the authority to regulate indecent material on public airwaves. Though the decision placed limits on broadcasting, Carlin's routine became a landmark in the fight for free speech, and he emerged as an unwilling but undeniable symbol of that battle. The significance of the 7 Words routine went far beyond its comedic value. It challenged societal norms, questioned arbitrary censorship, and opened the door for conversations about language, art, and expression. Carlin's willingness to push boundaries resonated deeply with those who felt stifled by the status quo. By refusing to compromise his vision, he became not just a comedian, but a cultural icon who redefined what stand-up comedy could achieve. This period of reinvention marked the beginning of Carlin's lasting legacy. He had transitioned from an entertainer looking for laughs to a social commentator using humor as a tool to provoke thought and challenge authority. The man who once played it safe had now become one of the most daring voices of his generation, a trailblazer who would inspire comedians and audiences for decades to come. In 1977, George Carlin found a stage that would forever change the trajectory of his career: HBO. At the time, the premium cable network was still in its infancy, but it offered something no other platform could: complete creative freedom. For Carlin, this was the perfect match. Free from the constraints of broadcast television, he could now deliver his material without censorship, performing exactly as he envisioned. His first HBO special, George Carlin at USC, set the tone for what would become a defining partnership in comedy history. The HBO specials were more than just stand-up performances. They were cultural events. Each one was a showcase for Carlin's sharp wit, fearless commentary, and ability to dissect the absurdities of modern life. Specials like Jammin' in New York, You Are All Diseased, and Back in Town became legendary for their biting critiques of politics, religion, consumerism, and societal hypocrisy. Carlin wasn't just entertaining audiences. He was challenging them to think critically about the world around them. His routines became a mirror, reflecting the flaws and contradictions of society with unflinching honesty. One of the most groundbreaking aspects of Carlin's HBO specials was their rawness. He tackled subjects others wouldn't touch, fearlessly addressing taboo topics with humor and insight. Whether he was exposing the double standards of organized religion or taking aim at the absurdities of American culture, Carlin never pulled his punches. This authenticity resonated deeply with viewers, cementing his reputation as one of comedy's most fearless voices. The 1980s, however, weren't without challenges for Carlin. His relentless work ethic and refusal to compromise took a toll on his health. He suffered his first heart attack in 1978, and more followed in the years to come. In 1982, he endured a serious episode while attending a baseball game, leading to an emergency angioplasty. On top of that, a car accident in 1981 added further strain to his recovery. These health struggles could have sidelined anyone else, but Carlin used them as fuel for his creativity. Each setback seemed to strengthen his resolve, pushing him to continue creating work that challenged audiences and redefined comedy. HBO became a sanctuary for Carlin, allowing him to evolve his art during these turbulent years. The specials served as a platform for him to connect directly with audiences, free from the interference of networks or sponsors. With each performance, he honed his craft, blending humor with profound social commentary. His material grew darker, sharper, and more unapologetically honest, reflecting both his personal struggles and his increasing disillusionment with the world. Carlin's partnership with HBO spanned decades, resulting in 14 groundbreaking specials. These performances weren't just about laughter, they were about sparking conversation and challenging conventions. By pushing the boundaries of what stand-up could achieve, Carlin turned comedy into a platform for truth-telling, using humor to cut through the noise of modern life. Despite his health challenges, Carlin's work during this era stands as some of the most powerful and enduring in comedy history. His HBO specials not only solidified his legacy, but also set a standard for future comedians, proving that stand-up could be as thought-provoking as it was entertaining. For Carlin, HBO wasn't just a stage. It was the place where he fully realized his potential, creating work that remains as relevant and impactful today as it was then. In the later years of his career, George Carlin continued to evolve, expanding his influence beyond stand-up comedy. While his voice remained sharp and provocative, he began exploring new avenues to share his perspective, further solidifying his legacy. One of his most notable ventures was his success as an author. In 1997, Carlin released Brain Droppings, a book filled with his signature humor and biting observations on life, language, and culture. The book became a bestseller, introducing his wit to a broader audience and proving that his insights were just as compelling on the page as they were on stage. It was followed by Napalm and Silly Putty, and When Will Jesus Bring the Pork Chops, both of which further showcased Carlin's ability to turn everyday absurdities into profound commentary. Carlin also left a memorable mark in the world of acting, a side of his career that sometimes surprised fans. In 1989, he appeared in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, playing Rufus, the wise, time-traveling mentor to the film's titular characters. The role introduced Carlin to a new generation, who embraced him as a quirky, yet authoritative figure. He reprised the role in the sequel, further cementing his place in pop culture. Another unexpected turn came with his role as Mr. Conductor on the children's television series Shining Time Station. While far removed from his edgy comedic persona, Carlin brought warmth and charm to the part, showing a different side of his talent and appealing to a younger audience. Despite these successes, Carlin faced significant challenges in his personal life during the 2000s. He struggled with addiction for much of his life, a battle he confronted head-on when he entered rehab in 2004. The decision to seek treatment marked a turning point, as Carlin worked to regain control of his health and well-being. At the same time, he faced financial difficulties stemming from unpaid taxes, which left him in significant debt. These struggles forced him to continue working relentlessly, even as age and health issues began to take their toll. Through it all, Carlin never wavered in his commitment to his craft. His final HBO special, It's Bad for You, aired in 2008 and served as a culmination of his career. In this performance, Carlin delivered a masterful mix of dark humor and searing insight, tackling themes of mortality, societal hypocrisy, and the absurdities of human behavior. It was a fitting farewell, showcasing a comedian at the height of his powers, still unafraid to speak his mind. The special encapsulated the essence of Carlin's work: fearless, thought-provoking, and profoundly funny. Carlin's later years were a testament to his resilience and dedication. Whether through his writing, acting, or stand-up, he continued to push boundaries, challenge norms, and connect with audiences in new ways. His ability to adapt and thrive, even in the face of personal and professional struggles, speaks to the depth of his talent and the strength of his character. By the time he delivered his final performance, Carlin had built a legacy that transcended comedy, leaving an indelible mark on the worlds of entertainment, free speech, and cultural critique. George Carlin's journey came to an end on June 22, 2008, when he passed away from heart failure at the age of 71. His death marked the loss of one of the most influential and uncompromising voices in comedy, but his legacy has only grown in the years since. Carlin was more than a comedian. He was a cultural force, a provocateur, and a champion of free expression who refused to shy away from controversial truths. His sharp observations about society, politics, language, and human nature remain as relevant today as they were during his lifetime. Just days before his passing, Carlin was announced as the recipient of the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor, one of the highest honors in comedy. It was a fitting recognition of his groundbreaking contributions to the art form and his fearless commitment to challenging the boundaries of what comedy could be. Though he didn't live to accept the award, the honor underscored the profound impact he had on shaping modern comedy and influencing generations of performers. Carlin's influence extends far beyond the stage. His routines continue to resonate because they speak to universal truths and challenge audiences to think critically about the world around them. Whether dissecting the absurdities of language, critiquing organized religion, or exposing the hypocrisy of political systems, Carlin's material cuts through the noise with clarity and precision. His ability to turn anger and frustration into humor made him a voice for those who felt disillusioned by the status quo. And his work remains a touchstone for anyone seeking to question authority and embrace authenticity. What sets Carlin apart is the timeless nature of his insights. Decades after they were first performed, his routines still feel fresh, often eerily prescient. They serve as a reminder that comedy can be more than entertainment. It can be a lens through which we examine the complexities of life and the flaws in our systems. Carlin's work continues to inspire not just comedians, but also thinkers, activists, and anyone willing to confront uncomfortable truths with courage and humor. As we reflect on George Carlin's extraordinary career, his legacy reminds us of the power of honesty and the importance of questioning the world around us. His influence is woven into the fabric of modern comedy, evident in the work of countless performers who cite him as an inspiration. From his unapologetic style to his fearless exploration of taboo subjects, Carlin set a standard that challenges comedians to push boundaries and audiences to think deeper. What is your favorite George Carlin moment or routine? Whether it's his iconic 7 words bit, his biting critiques of consumer culture, or one of his countless observations about the human condition, Carlin's work offers something for everyone. Share your favorite moments and join the celebration of a man who redefined comedy and left an indelible mark on the world.